Islam Makhachev versus Justin Gaethje is the fight that the UFC is trying to make. It is all but confirmed, guys. I'm going to give you guys the evidence. And while some may argue that, yeah, Islam Makhachev could be ducking many rifle contenders from getting their title shot, I actually think this is a good idea. Islam Makhachev is at a point of his career where he has done really good in the lightweight division. I mean, taking out Charles Oliveira, Volkanovski, then going after legends like Poirier, and then even trying to fight Arman Tsarukyan. We're at a point where we are struggling to find guys for Islam to fight, especially with this whole incident where Arman Tsarukyan is not getting the next title shot. So it seemed like many people were wondering, is it going to be Arman Tsarukyan or is it going to be Charles Oliveira? That seemed like the two only options. Or maybe even Islam Makhachev going up to 170, which is something that I do want to talk about later on in this video. But people forget that there is a lightweight fight going to happen. It might not seem like a number one contenders fights because, let's be honest, both these guys have had their ups and downs in their career. I'm talking Justin Gaethje versus Dan Hooker, UFC 313. I think a lot of people might be like, why would we even bother looking at this fight? But looking at the timeline, we have seen this time and time again. We saw Dustin Poirier do this very thing last year. This fight, I think, is going to be a number one contenders fight. Not only that, I think the UFC is planning this to be a number one contenders fight. But Justin Gaethje is a name that Islam does not have. And look, Justin Gaethje is a legend in his own right. Look, I'm not the biggest Justin Gaethje fan of him as a person, but I got to give credit where it's due. And I think Justin Gaethje is a legend. I think he's a phenomenal fighter, a great guy to watch. And I'm always excited to see who he's going to take on next. Could he come off as like a total idiot kind of sometimes? But I think that's also why some people like him. But yeah, look, Islam Makhachev said he's interested in this fight. And not only that, we know Arman Tsarukyan's not next. And what are they going to do? Charles Oliveira? It actually makes sense for them to do Justin Gaethje, especially if Gaethje is able to knock out Dan Hooker. Now, this is all just speculation. What is the proof? Well, go ask Islam Makhachev's manager, who I think accidentally kind of revealed this because he tweeted about a week or so back saying he's talking to the UFC about Islam's next move, and it does not involve Charles Oliveira. It does not involve Arman Tsarukyan. But yeah, Ali Abdelaziz said it does not involve those two names. I doubt he's going up to 170. And now with Islam calling out Justin Gaethje, I don't think this is something just out of the blue. I think this is something to get us talking, to put the idea of this fight into our heads, so when that pay-per-view comes in March, we are expecting this to be somewhat of a number one contenders fight. It makes sense too. It's the bigger fight. Obviously, Gaethje has headlined a few pay-per-views at this point for the UFC, as well as being just an overall fan favorite, so I could totally see them going with this fight. It also makes sense because, look, Ali Abdelaziz manages both Justin Gaethje and Islam Makhachev, and it's essentially going to be a win-win for him. But the question here is, can Justin Gaethje even beat Dan Hooker? That is a big if, in my opinion, because Dan Hooker has looked really good coming off of that win against Mateusz Gamrot. I could see a scenario where, you know, Gaethje is not the same after that knockout from Max Holloway. That's obviously the thing that he's last coming off, which is why it's kind of funny to even envision him in a title shot. But as I said, we've seen this before. Dustin Poirier came off of a head kick knockout to Justin Gaethje, came back months later and beat BSD, who was relatively unknown. I mean, I think a win over Dan Hooker at this point was more relevant of a win than when Dustin Poirier beat BSD. Then obviously he fought Islam. So it's not impossible. I know this might sound ridiculous, but it really is not. I think there's a huge possibility that Dan Hooker could beat Justin Gaethje. I'm not saying that's my prediction, but I'm just saying at this point, you know, Dan Hooker has been looking really good lately and he's been improving. And in my opinion, look, guys, the list for the title shot has to go like this. In terms of like who's available, I think they should first call up Arman Tsarukyan. I'm still interested in that rematch and it makes sense. Nobody else is really out there. Then my second choice would probably be Max Holloway coming off of a lightweight win. I mean, give him anybody, like a similar situation. Like if he fights literally like a BSD type of opponent, or maybe even book him against a top guy, I would like to see Max Holloway versus Islam Makhachev. That's a good fight. You know, Max Holloway was supposed to fight Khabib at one point, and then that obviously wound up falling through because of the whole weight issue with Max Holloway. Then I would actually rather see Justin Gaethje because I actually think that's a competitive fight, and I want to get to the competitive aspect of that in a little bit. Then I would probably go with Charles Oliveira and then Dan Hooker last, just because Dan Hooker, like I said, already fought Islam Makhachev, didn't do very well in that fight, and I don't envision would do much better in a rematch. But my bet is we're probably going to see Justin Gaethje versus Islam Makhachev next. That's what I think, and I think that's what the UFC is angling for. As I said, that's the more profitable fight if we're going to be honest, and I assume it's probably going to take place in July. Islam Makhachev called out Gaethje for July, and I think if all things go well, assuming there's, you know, no injuries, you know, Justin Gaethje wins, I think the UFC wants this to be next. But I think Gaethje could be problematic for Islam Makhachev, and I'm saying this because we all know Gaethje does have a wrestling background, and it didn't really seem like it against Khabib or against Oliveira. But Oliveira was never really able to take down Gaethje. I mean, he pulled guard at one point, and then, you know, he knocked down Gaethje to get the submission, and Khabib pretty much got 100% of his takedowns against Justin Gaethje. But Islam Makhachev is not Khabib. We've talked about this in terms of the grappling. I do think that Islam Makhachev is a greater fighter than Khabib, but they're not the same in terms of grappling, and I have a feeling that Islam Makhachev is not going to be able to easily ragdoll Justin Gaethje like Gaethje was ragdolled against Khabib per se. I think this is a fight, while I probably would not pick Justin Gaethje, I think there's a scenario where maybe he does actually wind up catching Islam Makhachev. Makhachev has gotten knocked out in his career. Also knocked down by Volkanovski, who isn't really known to be that hard of a hitter. And also Poirier had some moments against him. I mean, he wasn't even able to hold down Poirier. I think this fight is going to wind up taking place on the feet for a lot of it. And the question here is, does Islam Makhachev get tired? Is Gaethje able to land something in an exchange that changes the fight? How is Islam going to do on the feet against Gaethje? Is he going to succeed? Is he going to have trouble? Can he hang with a guy like Gaethje who has good leg kicks, good boxing, has power? It's going to be tough. And as I said, look, this is a great fight promotionally. This is what the UFC needs. This is going to be a big fight for Islam Makhachev. And I think at this point, they're trying to just build him up to be a beast, because I think they know that he potentially is going to have a lot of title defenses. I think they're trying to focus on names. That's why they're going after Dustin Poirier. They're going after Justin Gaethje. They're trying to build him up as a champion. And not only a champion, but a pay-per-view superstar that the UFC could rely on. So while yes, the rightful contender, in my opinion, is 1,000% Arman Tsarukyan. I don't think they're going to go that route. I think we're going to see Justin Gaethje, Islam Makhachev potentially next in July, but that's if he beats Dan Hooker. I think Dan Hooker has a big chance to beat Justin Gaethje. Thank you guys for watching. Check out my last video where I talked about Conor McGregor begging the Paul brothers for a fight. You guys are the best fan base in MMA. Hit the subscribe button, like, comment, and share, and I'll see you guys in the next one.